Alright, next video. Tough. The most horrifying
Every day, millions of people
workplace-
head to work.
The most horrifying workplace accidents ever. Alright, bet. Let's get it.
Expecting to make it home by the end of their shift. But throughout history, a handful of workplace disasters have turned ordinary workdays into unimaginable nightmares. In one case, a chicken processing plant burst into flames while workers desperately discovered the exits.
No! Free fried chicken for everybody, though. Free
have been
chicken for
padlocked shut.
everyone.
In another, a space shuttle crew unknowingly spent 2 weeks in orbit after a piece of foam struck their wing during launch, sealing their fate before their mission had begun. And in perhaps the most terrifying example of all, a cargo ship loaded with fertilizer exploded with such force that it leveled entire sections of a Texas city and killed hundreds of people in the process. In today's video, we will be talking about the
That's insane. Taking that many people out?
most horrifying workplace accidents in history. And if you're not subscribed, don't even worry about that. I will earn your subscription by the end of this video. Washington chemical tank implosion. On the morning of May 26, 2026, in the small town of Longview, Washington, a tank the size of a building folded in on itself and unleashed hundreds of thousands of gallons of a chemical that, in the words of medical experts, burns worse than acid. By the
Oh, nice. That's beautiful. That shit gonna burn the fuck out of me. That shit could literally fucking disintegrate people, basically. Fuck that.
time it was over, 11 men were dead, and it went down again, that's based on some opinions, as the deadliest industrial accident in modern Washington history. Now, you've probably seen the aerial photos of the crumpled tank if you follow the news, but what really is strange and sad is the timing and the small, ordinary details of
Yeah, that shit just fucking fell on itself, and that shit's high as fuck.
that morning. So let's get into it. First, a little context on what that place even is. Nippon Dynawave Packaging is a pulp and paper mill near the Columbia River, employing about 550 people, and every year it churns out roughly 300,000 tons of liquid packaging paper.
Holy shit. Yeah, and this is why fucking areas are polluted like fuck.
For cartons and cups, the equivalent of about 6 billion quart-sized milk cartons. So basically, the next time you pour a glass of milk, there's a decent chance the carton started somewhere in Nippon Dynawave. Now, the thing that killed these men was a chemical called white
Where?
liquor. It's used to break wood down into pulp. It's made up of sodium hydroxide, sodium sulfide, and disodium carbonate. It's described
It disintegrates wood. Nice.
as being like concentrated bleach
Like,
that,
why the
when it
fuck
touches
you
your
have
skin,
this shit?
destroys cells and can seep all the way down to the bone. It can also give off a toxic fume called hydrogen sulfide and wrecks your lungs. So yeah, in short, a big chemical plant with massive chemical tanks that would mean certain death if you came into contact with their contents. The implosion happened at the worst possible moment, right during a morning shift change. The day shift had started around
Oh, so everybody's fucking walking outside, probably passing by it.
7 a.m., and a group of workers had gathered for a safety meeting to get their assignments for the day. And where did they assemble? Well, right close to that towering 900,000 gallon tank, which was about 2/3 full at the time. So you had this big cluster of people standing, rather unfortunately, near the one thing that was about to fail. And to make
The one time they probably decide to stand under that shit, and this fucking happens.
it even worse, the little details of that morning are just gut-wrenching.
Bro, like, that's, I can't imagine, bro. Like, do you feel it? Like, you have to feel the initial impact of it. And then it's just like, at some point, you just start to not feel anything anymore because your fucking nerve receptors are burned to shit.
Take Jared Ammons, who was 35. He'd actually come in early so he could leave later for his wife's ultrasound appointment. They'd found out
Oh, that is fucking tragic. Bro, he was about to fucking go get an ultrasound with his wife after work. Holy shit, that's fucking brutal.
just the week before she was expecting their first child together.
Oh my god.
That morning he texted her, telling her he loved her and that she was beautiful. Then there's CJ Doran, who was just 26, who'd actually waved off his wife's suggestion to extend their Memorial Day weekend staycation because if he didn't go in, he wouldn't get his holiday pay.
That's fucking insane, bro. One decision could have changed the entire outcome of
Anyway,
somebody's
sometime
life.
between
That's
7:10
insane.
and 7:14 a.m., the tank failed and collapsed. Thousands of gallons of white liquor poured out, and anyone in its path either died or was badly hurt. The rushing force was so violent, it blew out cinder block shop walls and actually flipped the Nippon's 4x4 trucks like they were toys. Residents up to a mile away heard a boom, but they didn't think much of it because they're always hearing sounds from the mill. So when the autopsies came back, the coroner confirmed all of them had suffered alkaline chemical burns, and the manner of death for every victim was ruled an accident. Explosion at U.S. Steel Clairton.
A fucking accident? That's insane. Like, what kind of fucking closure is that for a fucking family? Oh, well, it just failed, and it was a oopsie daisy. We made a oopsie. Like, we made a fucking oopsie. 11 people died. What are you talking about?
Coke Works. Now it's a Monday morning, 10:47 a.m., and the largest coke-making plant in the entire Western Hemisphere suddenly lets out an ear-piercing boom that sends a black plume of smoke rising into the Pittsburgh sky. That was U.S. Steel's Clairton Coke Works in August of 2025, and the man I want you to meet first is Don Furco, a steel worker of 25 years and a former local union president. When that blast went off, he pulled on his flame-retardant jacket and pants, his hard hat and safety glasses, left his post, and ran straight towards the smoke. And what he found is something he can barely put into words. I can't even explain how mangled everything was. There were flames everywhere. Through all the chaos, he could hear a fellow steelworker screaming, buried under the rubble. Then there's Renee Hugh, a utility technician whose job was low.
Bro, they're alive. There was somebody alive under it
coke.
all?
By the way, when I say coke, we're talking about the essential raw material used in primary steel making, not cocaine. She was sitting in the cab of the plant's screening station when the explosion sent dust waves through the air and blinded her in the black dust. Her very first thought, I was dead. Then the flames came as the dust settled, and a voice crackled over the radio telling her that Battery 13 had just exploded. When it was all over, that blast had killed 2 U.S. steel workers and injured 11 others, including contractors. With that in mind, here's some better context to specifically answer, what is this place, and why is it so dangerous? First, the what. Clairton Coke Works is a 392-acre facility that opened more than a century ago, sitting about 20 miles south of Pittsburgh along the Monongahela River. Its ovens heat coal to around 2,000 degrees for hours to turn it into coke, which is a key ingredient in making steel. But the catch is that the process isn't clean and it isn't safe. This is like the thick of blue-collar work. Next, the why. Why is it dangerous? Well, heating the coal produces...
Yeah, like, there's no way to do this job, like, safely. Like, there's always that risk that you could die doing shit like this. That's insane. Like, you would think that they would have robots doing shit like this, but nah.
A flammable byproduct called coke oven gas, which contains hydrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide, and because of that high hydrogen content, the stuff is downright explosive. When you've got that around, you've got to be very, very, very careful. So from there, the story gets, honestly, a little maddening. The Federal Chemical Safety Board found that the explosion happened while the workers were down in a basement, closing and opening a gas isolation valve after pumping water into it. Now here's the thing. The company's own written procedure didn't even mention using water, but a supervisor directed the workers to pump it anyway. According to a U.S. Steel vice president, the workers ended up trapping 3,000 psi of water inside a valve that only rated for 50 psi. Yes.
What? Oh, so that shit just blew up on them.
Only 50 psi was holding 3,000 psi inside. There's no scenario where that was going to end well. And it didn't. The valve cracked, gas filled the area, the gas hit an ignition source, and it went up. What really makes you raise an eyebrow, though, is that this was far from the plant's first tragedy. Back in 2000.
I'm not even surprised, bro. They probably got away with multiple of these shits, bro. And it's just like, well, it needs to be done, so just keep going.
In 2009, a maintenance worker was killed in a blast. In 2010, an explosion injured 14 employees and 6 contractors. In 2014, a worker was burned and died after falling into a trench. One workers' compensation attorney pointed out that since 2009, there had been 3 accidents resulting in fatalities, which he said is just not common in today's age of safety, calling it flat out a dangerous place to work. And current and former workers have a theory as to why. They blame poor management and underinvestment in an aging facility, with one former worker saying that when something went wrong, it was often because corporate wouldn't approve ordering the parts. U.S. Steel, for its part, insists that safety is its core value. But for Furco, who's seen guys lose legs to rail equipment over his 25 years, nothing has ever hit him quite like this. deadly fire at
That's
Hamlet.
insane. Fucking 3 incidents since 2009 that caused fatalities, and they're still fucking up and running.
Chicken processing plant. This one is from 1991, so it's older, and trust me, we're going to get into a lot of older ones, but it's the kind of story that stays with you because so much of it was preventable. It happened at the Imperial Foods chicken processing plant in the small town of Hamlet, North Carolina, and the detail that everyone remembers is the locked doors. But there's a lot more to it than that, and once you understand the why, it gets even more infuriating, so let me walk you through it. The plant was owned by a man named Emmett Rowe and run alongside his son Brad, who served as operations manager. Now, the Rowes weren't new to this. They'd been in the chicken processing business since the early 1970s, originally up in Pennsylvania before they moved the whole operation down south. And why they do that? Well, partly because production was cheaper down there. But there's another reason that's a little more telling. According to one historian, Rowe came
They probably got in trouble up in PA, and they just fucking up and left and went down south so that way they wouldn't get caught.
south looking for leniency after OSHA had fined his Pennsylvania plant for dozens of violations, and he found it. In fact, he never even registered the Hamlet plant with North Carolina's Labor Department, which meant it would never be inspected. So have that in mind.
That's fucking insane, bro.
Because here's how it all went wrong.
Like, how do people get away with that shit, bro? Like, you're telling me nobody else thinks to just like, hey, we get chicken from here. Let's have somebody go out and fucking check it for health violations. Like, what, bro? And then people get fucking sick and fucking die from this shit, bro. That's insane. And these fucking companies are still able to fucking work and employ people.
On a conveyor belt that carried chicken to fryers had been leaking. The plant's head mechanic had actually asked Brad Rowe for money to buy new parts to fix it, but that request got denied. Instead, the crew was told,
no, just deal with the leaky fucking gas fumes that could explode at any fucking moment.
To improvise with spare parts, which was apparently a common money-saving move at this place. So on the morning of September 3rd, 1991, right after a long Labor Day weekend, the maintenance crew was reworking that line. They decided against shutting off the nearby fryer while they did it, partly because the downtime would anger Brad, and partly avoid the hassle. Then
and this is why fucking people like that shouldn't be managers, bro. Like, your fucking people are too scared to even fucking say anything to you because you're gonna flip your shit if they do the safer version of trying to fix something because it, downside a little bit to the company? Come on,
around
bro.
8:15 a.m., they turned the line on and the improvised connector failed. Hydraulic oil sprayed everywhere, some of it landed on the heating lines of the cooker, vaporized, and the fumes hit the open flame and ignited. The line ended up pumping somewhere between 50 and 55 gallons of fluid into that fire before it shut off. And the plant's sprinkler system, it had actually been disabled by an earlier fire years before and never repaired, so it never engaged.
That's insane, bro. And nobody ever came out to fucking look at it, look at the facility, so it's not like the fucking government could do, not like the government ever came out and fucking said, hey, you gotta fix this. So when your fucking employees are saying, hey, we need to fix this, and you're telling them, no, and then something goes wrong, then it's like, oh, well, I don't know what happened.
At all. Within 2 minutes, the place was engulfed in flames. And here's where the horror sets in. As workers tried to flee, they ran for the exits and found them padlocked from the outside. Emmett Rowe had directed a maintenance worker to chain those doors shut, supposedly to stop employees from stealing chicken. One loading dock exit was
Nah, that shit was planned, bro. That shit was planned. You're telling me while they're in there, they're just padlocked inside, bro? Yeah, nah, that's some fucking inside job shit.
blocked by a delivery truck with the driver asleep in the cab and another obstructed by a dumpster. People kicked at the doors and couldn't get them open. By the time it was over, 25 workers had died and 54 were injured. Many of the dead were single mothers from the impoverished local community.
Oh, and then now kids gotta grow up without their fucking only parent. That's fucking insane, bro. And he's probably going to get off with absolutely fucking nothing at this point.
And the aftermath? Emmett Rowe pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to nearly 20 years, though he was released after serving only a portion of it. The fire did...
Bro, what's a portion? 8 years? 10 years? Like, come
North
on,
Carolina
bro.
Passed 14 new
That's
worker
fucking
safety
disgusting.
laws, but for the families, it was far too late. Now, guys, I usually don't input my opinions a lot when I'm talking about these stories.
Yeah, let me hear it, Tub. I want to hear this.
But causing these people to burn alive...
Like, that's insane to me. You had people inside your facility that you didn't register. You didn't sign up for the didn't get the FDA to come out and look at it, whatever. And these people, single mothers who had children who are now parentless, burned alive. And you didn't even serve more than 20. You didn't even serve your 20-year sentence. You got off lightly. Like, that's fucking disgusting, bro.
Due to your neglect as a boss. People to burn alive due to your neglect as a boss. Having them die in one of the most horrific ways possible, burning alive and being locked inside and only getting 20 years, but then not even that. Nah, he got let out early because he just served a portion of it. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm reporting to you guys. Like, well, that sounds like I don't know what I'm saying. No. Sometimes I don't understand. I don't get it either. I don't. Well, you know, the root of everything, guys, you know what it is. It's money. It's money. There you go. There's the answer. It's going to be the answer to almost every question you have. It's going to be money. Almost. Not every single answer. But yeah, let's head on to the next one.
That's insane, bro. Yeah,
The
he paid his way
Plaza
out of it.
16-story collapse. This next one is about the danger that comes from building the very places we live in, and I want to start with what is still the worst building collapse in Connecticut history. It happened on April 23rd, 1987 in Bridgeport at a 16-story apartment complex that was going to be called Lombians Plaza. And to understand how this went so catastrophically wrong, you need to understand the method they were using. This was a method called lift slab. Now, lift slab is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of building each floor up in the air, workers pour the concrete floor slabs flat on the ground, then raise them up to the proper level using hydraulic jacks before fastening them onto the building's vertical steel columns. It's very clever in theory, and to keep workers safe during all this, OSHA had standards requiring the lifting systems to be able to carry 2.5 times more than the expected load. Whether those standards were actually followed here became a huge point of controversy later. Anyway, on that afternoon, not long after lunch, the workers were back at it laying slabs. Then, at 1:36 p.m., a slab slipped, and when one slipped, it set off an enormous domino-like cascade with the slabs pancaking down onto the workers below. 7 completed floors of the...
Oh my god. Bro, it's literally just 16 stories of doom, 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 and they're just all at the bottom of it. Holy shit. Yeah, bro, and there's no way, how big those shits were, there's no way that somebody's surviving that, bro.
Structure just toppled inward, crumpling into a pile of debris and dust in seconds. When the dust settled, 28 construction workers were dead and 22 others were injured. Among the dead were 27 men and 1 teenager, a boy who'd been working at the site alongside his father. So what?
Wow, bro. Bro just went to work with his dad for the day and
caused it? Oh, that's the frustrating part. A whole bunch of theories came out: a bent support column, columns out of alignment, cracks in the concrete, improper curing, a malfunctioning hydraulic lift, and on and on. The Labor Department even referred the contractor Techstar to the Justice Department for possible criminal prosecution, but in the end, the federal prosecutor recommended no charges be filed, saying there just wasn't enough evidence.
so more like, I got enough money that I'm gonna push this under the rug. What's up, my guy? Right now we watching the most horrifying workplace accidents ever, and by Tuv. The one we just listened to before this was oh my god, some people that worked in a chicken factory. And they got fucking trapped inside the building. And in this one, they were building a 16-story plaza. And they were lifting, like, giant fucking slabs in the air with hydraulics. And one of them fell, and it knocked everything else over. And it all just fell on top of, like, 28 workers? Yeah, 28 workers. Fell on 28 construction workers, and then there was one person, it was 27 men and then 1 teenager who was there with his dad, which is fucking crazy. And I think this happened in Connecticut.
The families eventually got a $41 million settlement, but the question of who was actually to blame, it was never really answered. One lasting change was that lift slab construction got hit with a moratorium until 1994, when new federal rules came out. Now you might think with all the modern safety advances, this kind of construction death is a relic of the past, but sadly, it isn't. Fast forward to June 4th, 2026 in Miami, Florida, and we have our second case. At the Ocon Tower construction
Oh, why not just keep fucking going?
This is a massive project, a 70-story
That's
hotel
insane,
and condominium
bro.
tower.
Oh, let's
expected
be.
to rise
I know
more
we
than
have
900
one
feet
fuck
above
up. Let's do
downtown
it again.
Miami. And on that day, a structural column that was being erected on the building's very top floor fell, trapping several workers underneath it. The one who didn't make it was Maria Fernanda Gonzalez Garcia, just 25 years old. She was struck by that falling column and died shortly after arriving at the hospital. Another male worker,
25 years old, bro. That's insane.
suffered serious injuries and is facing a long recovery.
Because your fucking
so nearly
company's
4 decades
negligence.
apart in 2 different states. 2 reminders that the people putting up our skylines are taking a very real risk every single day. The Pemberton Mill disaster. Next, we're going way back to 1860 for what is still the worst
God damn, 1860. George Washington days.
industrial accident in Massachusetts history. And honestly, the scale of this one is hard to even wrap your head around because we're talking about hundreds of victims here. So let me set the scene for you.
Holy shit, hundreds?
Place was the Pemberton Mill in Lawrence, Massachusetts, a textile factory that was at the time of the disaster. The mill had 2,700 spindles and 700 looms, earning the owners about $1.5 million a year. So just keep that image in your head. Floor after floor packed with heavy textile machines. Now, on the evening of January 10th, 1860, there were around 800 mill workers inside, and most of them were women and children. A lot of them were recent immigrants too. More than half had come from Ireland during the potato famine, with others from
Potatoes. That's fucking crazy, though. Fucking women and children were fucking working at this place, bro. Probably like cheap labor back in the day,
Germany,
but
and Switzerland. And then it happened. The workers heard this odd rattle followed by a long, ear-splitting crash. Part of the building's brick wall bulged and then exploded, and within seconds, the whole mill just collapsed. Tons of machinery fell straight through the disintegrating floors, dragging screaming workers down with it. When it was over, the collapsed building had formed a pyramid of rubble about 50 feet high. Dozens died within minutes,
Holy
but more than
shit.
600 workers were trapped alive in the wreckage
50
of twisted
feet
iron,
high?
smashed bricks, and splintered beams. The factory bells rang out an alarm, and basically the entire community rushed to the scene to help. Rescuers managed to pull more than 200 people out using ropes to move beams and pillars, calling out to the trapped and giving them water and coffee to keep them going. And when the sun went down, they built bonfires just to be able to see. Then it got worse. Around 10 p.m., 2 men climbed a crevice with lanterns to rescue a young woman who was trapped. And then one of those lamps broke. The flames raced across the conways and the wood, some of which was soaked in oil, and the whole wreckage went up. The Boston Globe reported that 14 people were burned to death right in front of their loved ones, who could do nothing to
holy shit. Bro, imagine standing there and watching that shit, bro. And it's like, you know who's in there. That's fucking tragic, bro. Like, you gotta watch your fucking family or something, like somebody you're related to fucking burn alive in that building.
One man facing being burned alive cut his own throat rather than face the flames.
Oh my god. Holy shit, rather than just burn. I mean, I don't blame him, but my god, that's brutal.
He survived that, only to die later of other injuries.
He survived? Oh my god. I mean, God, why? Why couldn't you just let me fucking die in the building?
Midnight, the screams had finally fallen silent. All told, somewhere between 90 and 145 people were killed and another 166 injured. But what brought the building down? Well, a jury found the engineer, Charles Bigelow, responsible because he'd allowed malformed cast iron columns to support the structure. Bigelow claimed he had no idea anything was wrong with the pillars, and despite hundreds dead, Bigelow never went to prison. In fact, no one received any punishment at all for what was a completely preventable disaster. The 1865 explosion at Mobile Ordnance Depot.
Damn,
This one takes us all the way back to
again.
1865, and it's got a tragic irony baked right into it. The Civil War had just ended, and the people of Mobile, Alabama, were trying to put their lives back together.
Alabama.
And then, on May 25th of 1865, an explosion tore through the city's riverfront that would end up being one of the deadliest accidental blasts in all of American history. So let me give you the lay of the land first. At this point, Mobile was under Union occupation, and the city was packed with soldiers, freedmen, laborers, and civilians all crammed together trying to rebuild. Down on the riverfront sat an ordnance depot, which was a former Confederate facility now controlled by the US Army. And what was inside it? Thousands of shells, cartridges, and kegs of gunpowder, all just sitting there awaiting disposal.
Because that can't go wrong at all. A fucking giant building full of just shit that can fucking spark and explode. Nice.
Or transport.
That's smart.
Specifically, this magazine in Marshall's warehouse held about 200 tons of ammunition and a staggering 30 tons of powder. So basically, you had a small mountain of explosives sitting right in the middle of a crowded city. Then, at about 15 minutes past 2 in the afternoon, it all went off.
Shocker, it exploded.
Witnesses reported a sudden flash followed by a thunderous blast that shook buildings clear across the city, and the contemporary accounts of how violent this was are honestly hard to believe. The shock made the city tremble like an aspen, shaking every building to its foundation, and the crash of broken glass was heard in every direction. Men were thrown down and seriously injured at a distance of half a mile away. A paroled Confederate soldier named John Kavanaugh was killed instantly aboard a nearby steamer purely from the concussion of the blast, with not a single mark visible on his body when they took him up. Now, this wasn't a one-and-done explosion either. The blast leveled the depot and then triggered a chain reaction of secondary explosions as the ammunition kept cooking off. Fire spread rapidly along the docks, consuming ships, warehouses, and homes. The scene was so dangerous that even as thousands of men worked to dig out victims, a shell would explode every 2 or 3 seconds with fragments and bullets whistling through the air, which kept even the bravest men from getting too close. On top of all that, somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 bales of cotton went up in flames, making the whole waterfront one giant inferno. Entire blocks were just gone. When the fire settled, most historians estimate around 300 people were killed, including Union soldiers, formerly enslaved laborers, dock workers, and civilians, with hundreds more injured. And that puts it right up there with disasters like the 1917 Halifax explosion and the 1947 Texas City disaster. The frustrating part is that it was never conclusively determined what actually caused it. At the time, the commanding general, Granger,
Really? Maybe somebody was fucking around in the fucking rooms that we shouldn't be fucking around in. Why are we fucking around in the explosion room? Yo, bro, can you go handle like the bombs and shit? Yeah. Hey, bro, look at this lighter trick I can do. Boom. Like, who let them fuck around in the room with all the fucking bombs in it?
Openly wondered whether
General.
it was the work of incendiaries.
Who's this, General Shepard?
Or just plain carelessness. One dispatch suggested it was probably the accidental explosion of percussion shells being unloaded from rail cars and stored in the warehouse. But the men who would have known for sure, the handful of employees and the 30-some soldiers inside the warehouse.
Yeah, why don't you go ask them? Go ask them with a fucking Ouija board.
At the moment of the blast, were all killed, so it'll probably never be truly known. No evidence of sabotage was ever proven. The collapse of Pittston Coal Company's slurry dams. After this next disaster happened, just when the Pittston Coal Company was facing the families in court, do you know how they described what happened? In their legal filings, they called it, quote, an act of God. And
listen, can't hold me responsible. God did it.
as you'll see,
God did.
that label sat about as wrong with
God's
the
like, don't put
survivors
this
as you
shit on me,
imagine,
bro.
because there was nothing godly or accidental about it. This is the Buffalo Creek flood, and here's how it unfolded. Up in the mountains of Logan County, West Virginia, the Pittston Coal Company kept 3 dams holding back coal slurry, which is basically the black, sludgy waste left over from mining. Now here's the problem with dam number 3, the one that failed first. It sat about 260 feet above the town of Saunders, and instead of being built on solid bedrock, it was built right on top of the coal slurry sediment that had collected behind the other 2 dams. So you've got a dam made of coarse mining refuse, sitting on a foundation of sludge, looming over people's homes. And get this, a federal mine inspector had declared
Because that
the
definitely
impoundment
won't fucking... Because mudslides definitely aren't a fucking thing.
factory just 4 days earlier. So on the morning of February 26, 1972, after heavy rains, dam number 3 gave away, and once it went, the water it released overwhelmed dams number 2
Shocker
and
again.
1 in turn, one after the other. The result was a wall of roughly 132 million gallons of black wastewater, cresting over 30 feet high, pouring straight down the hollow. And the people barely had any warning at all. One survivor, Shirley Markham, Recall that the only heads up they got was a neighbor pulling up in front of the house and hollering, "Run, the dam has broke." Then she could hear the roar of it, and she watched her neighbor's houses crumble with trees, logs, cars, and slush all churning inside. The water tore through 16 coal towns, and out of the population of about 5,000 people, 125 were killed, 1,121 were injured, and over 4,000 were left homeless. A reporter named Mannix Porterfield, who covered it, said the aftermath looked like a battlefield, as if some foreign enemy had flown in and nuked the place with railroad tracks yanked up and twisted in what he called huge metallic pretzels. And what struck him most was that the survivors weren't even crying. They just had this blank stare of resignation, like people who were so used to being battered by hard times that this was just one more installment. Amid all that
Nah, bro, I would be hurling insults at people, bro. You telling me that y'all built this shit and y'all gonna not help me and now I'm homeless? Nah, fuck y'all.
loss, though, there's one little thread of hope worth mentioning. A baby named Carrie Albright became known as the miracle baby of the disaster. As the leading edge of the water came, his mother
That's
threw him
crazy.
just above the flood level moments before she herself drowned. He survived with few ill effects.
Holy shit, that's fucking tragic.
And his survival ended up giving hope to other survivors. Now about the act of God defense. Two commissions ended up investigating, and the second one, a citizens commission set up to counter the coal-friendly bias of the first, concluded that the Buffalo Creek Pitson Coal Company was guilty of murdering at least 124 men, women, and children. The state of West Virginia originally sued Pitson for $100 million in damages, but Governor Arch Moore settled it all for just $1 million. 3 days before he left office in 1977. The survivors who sued separately settled for $13.5 million, which worked out to be $13,000 each after legal costs. Columbia Space Shuttle's explosion in space.
That's crazy.
Now, this is probably the most famous case in this whole video, and there's a chance you already know the gist of it. The Space Shuttle Columbia broke apart over Texas in 2003.
Isn't this the teachers? Aren't these like the people that were all teachers that went up in space?
Killing all 7 crew members aboard. So instead of just rehashing what everyone knows, I want to focus on the parts that'll stick with you. The fact that the thing that killed them happened in the first 82 seconds of the flight, and the gut punch finding that came out months later about what could have been done. So let's rewind to the launch on January 16, 2003. Everything looked fine, but just 81.7 seconds into the flight, a large piece of foam insulation along with a couple of smaller pieces broke off from the shuttle's external propellant tank, and a fraction of a second later...
Bro, there's probably so many people watching this shit, bro, because back in the day, people used to watch these shits on TV. They used to be standing there watching this shit.
1.9 seconds, that big chunk slammed into the leading edge of Columbia's left wing, hitting around the reinforced carbon panels on the underside. Now, from an unformed view, a piece of foam might sound harmless, like a chunk of styrofoam off a cooler, but at launch speeds, it struck a part of the wing that was absolutely critical because those panels are what protect the shuttle from the insane heat of re-entry. The cameras watching the launch caught the foam collision, so people knew it had happened, but engineers couldn't pinpoint exactly where it hit or how bad the damage was. Similar foam strikes had actually happened on 3 prior shuttle launches without causing any critical damage, so there was a sense that maybe it was fine. Some engineers, though, worried it could lead to catastrophic failure, but their concerns weren't really addressed during the 2 weeks Columbia spent in orbit because NASA management figured that even
So they could have been up there dead for 2 weeks and nobody fucking knew?
if there was major damage, there wasn't much that could be done about it anyway. In fact, Mission Control emailed the crew about the debris strike with a short video clip telling them there was, quote, absolutely no concern for re-entry. So the crew came home thinking everything was fine.
Oh my god, they were alive. Oh my god, and they had to and they gotta re-enter fucking orbit. And they're gonna fucking burn, bro. That's fucking...
On the morning of
Oh
February
my
1st,
god,
Columbia
bro.
re-entered the atmosphere, and because the heat shielding on the left wing had been damaged, wind and searing heat poured into the wing and began tearing it apart. The timeline of those final minutes is honestly chilling when you read it. As the shuttle screamed over California, sensors started flashing off nominal readings, one after another, and then ground observers began reporting debris shedding from the orbiter. First one piece, then a second, then a third, the reports just stacking up as it crossed the western states. At 8:59 and 32 seconds, the last communication from the crew was cut off, and the last telemetry was received. Then, at about 9 a.m., the shuttle disintegrated over northeast Texas near Dallas. People on the ground heard a loud boom and saw streaks of smoke across the sky. Debris and the remains of the crew ended up scattered across more than 2,000 locations spread over East Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana. And as if the loss of 7 lives wasn't enough, the tragedy claimed 2 more. 2 pilots aboard a search helicopter were killed in a crash while looking for debris. On a strangely weird note though, some worms the crew had been using in a study, stored in a canister above the shuttle, actually survived. The explosion of Union
That's fucking crazy, bro. And to think, bro, and it's just these fucking companies get away with fucking not following regulations and shit like that, and then they're telling them, "Oh yeah, you're good." Like you got them fucking people killed,
Oil
bro.
co-refinery in Romeoville. So this one starts with something almost mundane, a worker spotting a tiny crack during a routine check, and it ends with a 34-ton tower being launched the length of several football fields and 17 people dead. It happened on July 23rd of 1984 at the Union Oil Refinery in Romeoville, Illinois, just outside Chicago, and it remains one of the worst refinery disasters in US history. Let me take you through how a hairline crack escalated into a mushroom cloud over the suburbs. First, a bit on what the place was. The Union Oil Refinery.
Oh yeah, the one that fucking they had the fucking PS5 controller for. Yeah, bro, and then that's like they were like, oh, well, we can't find it right now. Like, what do you mean you can't find it? There's people on that fucking like that's humans on that fucking submarine, and you're just like, oh well, we might find it, we might not, and like you sent them down, knowing that that shit was gonna do exactly what it did, bro. And the craziest thing, I'm pretty sure it was real. That's crazy. But I saw the thing. Mr. Beast like went and like checked it out before they went out and did like the thing. And they asked Mr. Beast to be a part of it, and he winded up saying no. And then it fucking happened. And I'm like, bro, imagine if Mr. Beast got on that shit, bro. Like, that's insane. Like, that's king of YouTube gone. Like, thank God he said no, but that's just insane that they basically knew that it was gonna fucking break once it got down to that low of a fucking pressure, and it was like, well, you guys can go down anyway, have fun.
Employed more than 700 workers and processed about 151,000 barrels of oil a day. And at the center of this story is one specific piece of equipment, a towering vessel called an amine observer tower, which was used to strip hydrogen sulfide out of a stream of propane and butane. The thing was big, standing 62 feet tall and 8.5 feet across, built from steel plates about an inch thick. Now have that tower in mind, because there's a hidden backstory to it that's the real villain here. See, the vessel had been in service since 1970, and over the years it had gone through several repairs. Back in 1974, inspectors found hydrogen blisters and damage in the shell, so the refinery replaced part of the lower section using welding. But after that welding, no post-weld heat treatment was done, which is a vital step that relieves the internal stresses welding creates and restores the steel. And over time, something insidious was happening to that metal. The steel had been quietly eaten away by a process called hydrogen embrittlement, which is exactly what it sounds like. Hydrogen seeps into the metal and makes it brittle, prone to cracking. By 1984, this had reduced the fracture resistance of the steel by more than half. So now we get into that evening. Shortly before 6 p.m., a worker doing a routine hourly check discovered a hairline crack in one of the welds. The operator tried to close the main inlet valve to stop the gas leaking out of what started as a roughly 6-inch crack, but the crack kept growing. It stretched to about 2 feet, the operator called for an evacuation, and a significant amount of flammable gas was now pouring out as the company firefighters gathered at the scene. And then a spark from somewhere hits the vapors, and the whole thing went up. The explosion propelled the upper 46 feet of that massive vessel more than half a mile from where it had stood, while the base just stayed put at the center of the inferno. And a second explosion was even worse. It rocked buildings 15 miles away, blew the windows out of a bank in Joylet, and sent smoke billowing thousands of feet into the air. The fire was so enormous it pulled in mutual aid from more than 30 cities, including medical evacuation helicopters and even a Chicago Fire Department fireboat sent up the sanitary canal. In the end, 17 Union Oil employees were killed, and 10 of them were members of the company's own fire brigade. The blaze was so devastating that coroners had to rely on dental records to identify some of the victims. And to think it all traced back to a crack.
Shit, they were burned so badly. The only thing you could fucking identify them by is their fucking dental records.
Fertilizer freighter Grand Camp's disaster. This one is from 1947, and it's the answer to the question of how a single cargo ship can take out an entire town. The SS Grand Camp was a freighter docked in the port.
A whole town?
Of Texas City, and it was being loaded with ammonium nitrate fertilizer. For context, ammonium nitrate had been used during World War II to make TNT, and after the war, it got diluted and sold as crop.
Oh yeah, use it as crop fertilizer.
And in its pure form, it's not really flammable, but it does become dangerous when it heats up or mixes with the wrong things. The problem in 1947 was that hardly anyone treated it as dangerous.
Something that makes TNT can explode when too hot or mixed with the right chemicals. Who would have ever thought that? Clearly not these fucking
In fact,
idiots.
after the disaster, relatively safe, even comparing handling it to handling cement. Yes, strange, but this was in the 40s, lots of things were strange. Now, by the morning of April 16th, around 2,300 tons of fertilizer had already been loaded into the ship's holds, and
2,300 tons, bro. What?
around 8 a.m., shortly after the longshoremen went down into the holds,
One
they smelled
ton is
smoke
a
and
lot.
spotted a small fire 10 to 15 feet below them near the hull. They tried jugs of water and a fire extinguisher, but it just didn't work. The decision that turned out to be catastrophic was that they didn't want to flood the holds with hoses for fear of ruining the cargo, so the captain decided to force steam into the holds instead, hoping to smother the fire without damaging the fertilizer. The issue, though, is they apparently didn't realize that ammonium nitrate doesn't need outside oxygen to burn, and the steam likely just made things worse, heating the cargo towards the roughly 850-degree point at which the stuff detonates. So, as all this was happening, that dense, brilliantly colored smoke
800 degrees? Nah, bro, that shit is... That's just... We getting there to a point.
had been seen all over town, and because dock fires were pretty common in Texas City, residents actually came down to watch the spectacle, which is exactly why there were so many bystanders, and so many casualties when it finally blew. At 9:12 a.m., the Grand Camp detonated. The
Oh, I want to go watch. Yeah, now look at you, dumbass.
blast was heard
Should've stayed
150
your ass at
miles
home.
away, and the ship's 1.5-ton anchor was hurled 2 miles from the dock. It threw cargo 2,000 to 3,000 feet into the air, caused a 15-foot tidal wave that crashed onto the dock, and shattered windows in Houston 40 miles away. The shockwave even registered on a seismograph as far away as
40 miles away, and it was breaking fucking windows in houses. That's fucking crazy.
Denver, Colorado. The nearby
That's a
Monsanto
fucking
chemical plant just a
massive
few hundred
ass
feet away
shockwave.
was destroyed, killing 234 of the 574 workers there, and the chief and 27 firefighters from the Texas City Fire. 234 of the 574 workers there, and the chief and 27
200?
firefighters from the Texas City Fire Department were killed in that initial blast. But it wasn't over. There was another ship, the High Flyer, anchored right next to the Grand Camp, and it was carrying about 1,000 tons of ammonium nitrate plus 2,000 tons of sulfur, which makes the stuff even more volatile. It had caught fire and started drifting, and the crew couldn't get its anchor up, so they eventually abandoned it. Then at 1:10 a.m. the next morning, about 15 hours after the first blast, the High Flyer exploded too, demolishing yet another nearby ship, the Wilson B. Keene. In all, somewhere between 500 and 600 people died, and the wounded numbered in the thousands.
Holy shit, 500 to 600 people.
Fire at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. So we end where, in a lot of ways, the whole story of American workplace safety sort of begins. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire of 1911 is probably the most famous industrial disaster on this list, and you may already know about it. A New York factory burned, 146
Nah, don't you about to tell me about it though.
workers died, and it changed labor laws forever, but the details of those 18 minutes are what makes it unforgettable. The Triangle Factory occupied the top 3 floors of the 10-story Ash building in Manhattan, and it was a true sweatshop. Owned by Max Blank and Isaac Harris, the workers were mostly young immigrant women and girls, many of them Italian or Jewish, aged roughly 14 to 23, who spoke little English and worked grueling hours for a few dollars a week. Now here's a piece of
That's fucking crazy, bro. These fucking people are fucking disgusting, bro. And these people get away with this shit.
context most people don't know. Blank and Harris had a deeply suspicious history with fire since their factories had burned multiple times in the years before.
Really? The two dumbasses that burned down multiple fucking facilities already burned down another
And
one.
it seems they deliberately torched their own workplaces before business hours to collect on big fire insurance policies, a not uncommon scam at the time. And because of that, they refused to install sprinklers or take real safety measures, you know, in case they ever needed to burn the place down again. So just sit with the awful irony of that for a second. Now, on the afternoon of Saturday, March 25th, around 4:40 p.m., a fire flared up in a scrap bin under one of the cutting tables on the 8th floor, and that bin was the perfect fuel. It had 2 months worth of accumulated fabric cuttings, hundreds of pounds of scraps. A manager grabbed the fire hose to fight it, but it was useless because the hose was rotted and its valve had rusted shut. So right away, the one thing that might have stopped it failed. As the workers tried to flee, they found one of the stairway doors locked from the outside. And why was it locked? Because it was a common practice to keep the doors locked during working hours so managers could check the women's purses for stolen goods on their way out, and historians have also tied it to keeping union organizers out. You're just
Fucking
as confused as I am,
scumbags.
viewer. I don't know. The four men who held the key to that door had already escaped by another route, so
Oh,
the workers were
nice.
trapped.
Figures.
Some crowded into the small flimsy fire escape, but it twisted and collapsed under the heat and weight, spilling about 20 people nearly 100 feet to their deaths on the pavement below. With no way out, the girls began appearing at the windows and jumping. The fire department had arrived fast, but their ladders only reached as high as the 7th floor, and the fire was on the 8th. One reporter, William Gunn Shepard, described learning a new and horrible sound that day, the thud of a living body hitting the stone sidewalk.
Oh, yeah, that's not a fascinating sound. I'm not gonna lie.
All 62 people jumped or fell to their deaths.
That's a different, when you hear that shit, that's a different kind of noise, bro. When you see a video or something of somebody hitting the ground, bro, it's completely different, bro. That noise of a human body just crushing on ground, on like concrete, bro.
18 minutes, it was all over, and 146 people were dead. The owners, Blank and Harris, were put on trial for manslaughter, but their lawyer managed to get them acquitted. Their insurance company actually
That's
paid them
fucking
about
insane.
$445 per death, more than their reported losses, meaning they came out ahead. And just 2 years later, Blank was arrested again for locking a factory door during working hours and was fined a measly $20. But the deaths were entirely in vain because the outrage finally forced real change, leading to dozens of new laws on fire exits, sprinklers, and alarms that protect workers to this day. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you like the way
That's fucking insane, bro. The fact that they got acquitted, bro, fucking brutal. That's insane. I can imagine that though, because they're jumping from fucking high up in the air. And they're coming down hitting the ground hard as shit, so I can definitely see that. Alright. I think we're gonna honestly push this last video back.